thing you do once you're good, it's the thing you do that makes you good. Giving the students the ability to practice in class as well as outside of class is extremely beneficial when trying to improve on skills and technique. Acro and gymnastic skills are not mastered overnight. It requires a large amount of hard work, dedication, and practice, especially outside the studio. Being able to have the knowledge to properly spot and correct your child when they are practicing these skills at home will be very helpful for the both of you. When I was in my early years of acro and gymnastics, my father learned how to spot a few of the basic tricks I was attempting to master at the time so that he would be able to help me practice at home. I'm going on my 4th year teaching, so I've had plenty of experience spotting all ages, from young intermediate levels to older advanced levels. I'll be demonstrating to spot the following tricks, which include a side aerial, back handspring, and front aerial. She'll be doing this, we'll be spotting, and I'll give you an opportunity if you would like to learn while I'm here. So the first trick I'll be explaining and demonstrating is a side aerial. A side aerial is best described as a cartwheel with no hands. When first learning how to do this, usually the student will run to build up speed and momentum to push themselves into the air to land safely back on their feet. You do not want to attempt to spot a student that cannot effectively perform a cartwheel, as they are not ready to move on to this more advanced trick. When attempting to spot this trick, you want to stand far enough away from the student, giving them distance to run to you to perform the actual trick. So I'd stand down probably this far along the mat so she can run and skip to me. Once she gets to me, she should have enough power to be able to push and get all the way over. The dancer is going to run and skip right in front of you so that you can place your hands in the proper place to guide them into the air. So for the hand placement, you're going to want to place one hand on top of the other. So you can either put your right hand on top or left hand. Just give me this tip. Whatever way is more comfortable. I usually put my right hand on top because I'm right hand dominant, so I can use my right hand better. And I would place my hands on her hip, and that's where I'm going to be pushing her over to guide her. So depending if she's doing a left cartwheel, you'd be pushing on her left hip. So I'd have to stand reverse, or she'd have to start down at this side of the mat. And so I'll be pushing on her left hip, and then if she's a right cartwheel, I'd be pushing on her right hip, and she'd start down at the other side of the mat. Be sure to never spot with your knees fully locked, so you don't want to spot this way, because usually if you bend it, and then as you're pushing them over, you can kind of straighten them and guide them over that way, depending on how much force you actually need to apply to spot them. You always want to keep your knees slightly bent so that you can straighten them if needed. When pushing them, you want to make sure you're pushing them up versus out. So if you're pushing them over, it's going to make it longer, which are going to be in the air for way too long, and it's going to be too hard for them to get back on their feet. So you kind of want to guide them up. You still want to push them over a little bit, but not as much, because it shouldn't take up a lot of space. It should be more up and down, like in the air. If the child's traveling very far, then this is something that needs to be addressed. A side aerial should be thought of as short in length and high in the air rather than long in length and low to the ground. So a few things to keep in mind as you're spotting this specific trick are making sure your child's legs are straight with pointed feet. They're looking down at the ground, so you want to make sure they're trying to look at themselves in the mirror or anywhere else. Usually when they try to curl them too long, they look anywhere else but the floor. They're using enough power to get over quickly, so you don't want them to stay in the air for a really long time. It's a quick trick, so you want to be able to get them up and off of the floor, back onto the ground in a quick amount of time. They're pushing off of one foot, so they skip. They should be pushing off of one foot, landing back onto one foot, and then having the other foot land on the ground. So they should never land 2 feet on the same time, like a round off. It's totally different. And you want to make sure they're swinging their arms up by their ears as they skip, and then down and behind them while they're in the air. So they run and skip, arms come up, and then they're going to push them back behind them, and that's also going to help give them some momentum to get over. So she's going to run and skip to me. So usually if it's a beginner, I just have them run and skip and cartwheel, just so that they can feel where I'm going to be placing their hands and kind of get an idea so they're comfortable with the trick, and so am I. So go ahead. So we'll try it this time. So to make sure I'm standing close enough to her so I can actually get my hands in there since she is running to me. So go ahead and run. And so her arms were behind her. I was still able to get her over. So she didn't take up much space at all. She started here, ended all the way down there to that mat. She'd never be able to do it by herself because it would just be way too long to get her back down to the ground. So again, I bend my knees a little bit because it's easier, it helps to push her up. Go ahead. And then as she goes over, straighten my legs a little bit. Then one more try. Oh, that's okay. Ready? Okay. Good. Try it again. So you're just going to place hands on the hip, push her over, and then really all the rest is on her. It's basically a cartwheel. Yeah? Good. Anybody else want to try? All right. So, the next trick I'll be explaining and demonstrating is a back handspring. So a back handspring is best described as when the dancer is jumping backwards off of 2 feet onto their hands and pushing or springing back to land onto their feet. The easiest way to learn how to spot a back handspring in the beginning is standing versus running with a round off. So if they're running with a round off, you kind of have to follow them and try to adjust to where they are. It's a lot harder to get your hands in there rather as if they were just standing. Usually that's the best way to learn the basic. Then you add the running and the round off with it once they master the standing. The student cannot perform a back walkover or other tricks that require going backwards on their own. You should not attempt to spot them. In beginning to spot this trick, you want to make sure the student is standing close enough to you so that your arms are not stretched completely, trying to reach for them. So if she was standing all the way over here, I wouldn't be able to gain as much control or help support her, rather than if she was closer to me, my arms are able to be bent and I'm able to actually use them effectively. For a student who's smaller, like her, spotting in a kneeling position is much easier rather than standing, because I'd have to be really, really bent down to actually reach my hands where they needed to be. If I was spotting someone taller, standing would be more appropriate. If you're standing, make sure that your knees are not fully locked again, because it'll just put too much pressure on your back. If you're kneeling and standing on the child's left side, which I am, so I'm going to place my right hand on the lower part of her back, and then my wrist is going to be twisted. My left hand's going to be on the back of her knee. So then if I was standing on her right side, it would just be the opposite hands. It's whatever side you like to prefer. Again, I'm right hand dominant. This is the arm I'm going to be using more, so that's why I like to be on this side when I'm spotting. The hand is on the lower part of the back, is the hand that's going to be carrying most of the weight, as you want to be able to keep them from falling straight onto their head. And the hand that's placed on the back of the knee will be able to guide the legs over in a quick motion back to the floor. There's a 3-step preparation before the student actually jumps backwards into the back handspring. So first is feet together and arms are right up by the ears. Second, she's going to swing her arms down and pretend like she's sitting in a chair. And third would be jumping straight up and back, which she's not going to jump back because she's not actually performing it. So this is good to do for someone who's never done a back handspring before, just going over this preparation and having them take their arms up and swinging them back down and then jumping straight back up, just so that they can get the motion of what you're actually doing before you jump backwards. Something else that's helpful is if they have their arms up, they're going to swing down and they're going to jump back and arch, and I'm going to catch her mid-air, so that she can make sure, and I can make sure by looking in the mirror, that she's in an arched position. If she is tucked like this, that's not the position you want to be in. She's going to hit her back, her head first, rather than letting her hands hit the floor first. So she's going to be passing through a handstand position during all of that. A few things to keep in mind when spotting this trick are making sure the student's arms are directly by their ears. Their legs should be straight and squeezing them together. If they're apart, usually the person spotting will get injured, or they might get injured because they tend to bend their arms also, and they'll fall on their head. With pointed toes, their head should be arched looking for the floor rather than their chin to their chest. And most importantly, making sure their back is arched, which I just showed you that position, rather than curling up in a ball, because then they'll just jump back and hurt themselves. back handspring should take up a decent amount of space, unlike the side aerial. So if they're jumping backwards where their hands were going into the same place, or their feet were, their hands are going in the same place that their feet were, then they're undercutting. So usually they're not going to be able to do it by themselves if that's the case. So when they're jumping back, you want to make sure that they're jumping back away from their feet, making it longer in length. Something to do that helps encourage them is trying to take up the whole length of the mat. So I just ask them to show me how long they can make their back handspring. Then they tend to get the idea in their head to jump back further and make it longer in length. You want to make sure they never land with their knees fully locked, as this will jar their knees and more than likely cause an injury. So they always want to end in a slight plie or a slight bend and then rebound afterwards, as this prepares them to do multiple back handsprings over and over again. Once they become comfortable with this, then they can move on to the sequenced back bends. So we'll start at the beginning of the mat. So I'm placing my hand on the lower part of her back and on her knee. She's going to swing her arms down. We're going to actually do it. And she's jumping back and jumping back up. So all of my left hand's doing is just guiding her legs over. This hand's just making sure she's not jumping too hard onto her hands and then falling onto her head. So again, she swings, jumps back, and then her legs snap over quickly. Does anybody want to try? Yeah? Okay. Try it again.
She's pretty funny. She is.
Good. Nice. All right. So the last trick I'll be explaining and demonstrating is a front aerial. A front aerial is best described as a front walkover with no hands. Like the side aerial, you want to stand far enough away from the student so they can run to build up the momentum and speed to perform the trick, making it back safely onto their feet. It's important to learn and review the hand placement on this first, making sure you fully understand what you'll be doing, because this is a bit more complicated to grasp than others. You can spot with a t-shirt at first, but it's easier and harder in some ways because you're able to yank on the t-shirt, but being able to use your hands, you're kind of able to get in there and actually move them where you want them to go. So for proper hand placement, so she'll be starting down this way. You're going to want to place your left hand on the lower part of her back, and your right hand's going to be on her stomach with your thumb facing downwards, so your wrist's going to be twisted. And as she goes over, your hands are going to twist with it, and then your arms are going to cross the other way over. So you first start with your left arm crossed over. It's going to switch so that your right arm's crossed over. So if I was starting on her right side, it would just be switched. My arms would be crossed over, right arm over top, and then I'll switch to the left arm over top. So your main purpose of spotting this trick is to help lift them into the air. So as soon as they skip and begin to push off the floor, you want to make sure you can get your hands in there in enough time to help lift them off the air to complete the entire trick. A few things to keep in mind when attempting to give corrections to your child is making sure they're making a full swinging motion with their arms. So when they skip, their arms start up by their ears. They're going to swing down and come all the way back around, making a full circular motion. This is extremely important as it helps them to complete the entire trick, especially following through with the landing. Usually if they stop their arms down or don't follow through with it, they aren't able to follow through with the actual landing itself. You want to make sure, just like the side aerial, they're pushing off of one foot and landing back onto one foot, not two. They should remain in an arched position throughout the entire trick. So this includes their head and their back, so their head should never reach the chest. And you never want them to contract over to be curl into a ball. If that does happen, then they won't be able to land on their feet, they'll just land on their butt first. Their legs should be straight, splitting in the air with pointed toes. And last, make sure they're never sitting their butt towards the ground when they're trying to land. Again, if you're sticking your butt out, you're going to sit onto your butt. Always make sure that your hips are facing up towards the ceiling.